So perhaps you've always wanted to learn how to make really cool stuff in 3D software. You might not have done it, you might have dabbled in it a little bit. In this tutorial, what I'm going to be doing is trying to take one video and introduce a lot of the fundamental things, the things you really need to get started. And I'm going to show you how to do it in a free software called Blender that you can very easily download without an account or a password or anything like that. So you can see here, this is the final result. I'm going to show you first of all, the software itself, just the very basics, not covering all the thousands of different things. And then I'm going to take you step by step after that through the making of this character here and how to render it out as a final result. And you can use this same low poly modeling technique here, which is really simple and beginner friendly, to make all sorts of things. So hopefully this video grabs your interest if you want to learn as an absolute beginner. If you already know something about Blender, maybe this is just a little bit too basic and repetitive, but this is definitely more for absolute beginners, people who really don't know anything and they just want a simple video that's going to make it make sense. And you can also, after an hour or so, walk away with something that you can feel really good about, a final result. And from there you can choose if you want to go on and learn more about the discipline of 3D modeling, maybe even animation later on. So let's get into the video, and I hope you enjoy. I will be adding some timestamps so it can make it easier for you guys, the different chapters, and you can bounce back and forth if you get stuck. Let's hop in. So getting your hands on Blender is quite simple. You go to your internet browser, you can type in blender.org, open up the site, and you're going to go to the tab here called Downloads. And what you can do is just click on this blue button here. That's going to download an installation file so you can install it on your computer. Another option, which I prefer to do, is to go to this little drop down here, and you're going to actually see the portable versions here. So it's for Windows and Mac. In my case, I have a Windows computer. I would click on the zip file here for the Windows portable, download that zip folder, then extract it like you do with any zip folder, and then just open that folder. Inside of there, there's going to be Blender. You click on it, you run the program. And when it runs for the first time, you can just right click and pin that program to your taskbar. And there you have it. So very, very simple. No signing in, no passwords, no accounts. And you can do that anytime there is a new release. You can even have multiple versions of Blender. So that is very self-explanatory, very easy. So I'm not going to go any more into that. Let's get into the next thing where we actually open it up and I'll show you how to use it. So if you go ahead and open up Blender, you may even be doing it for the very first time. And if you do, it may even seem a little bit intimidating, but rest assured, all of these different tabs and windows and features that you see, most of them you will not need to know a thing about just getting started. You'll learn that with time. Now this thing you see here, the box when you first open up Blender, what most people do is they just left click somewhere in the viewport and that box just pops away. Now getting on to the user interface itself, what you're going to see here is the one that just stands out. And this is, like I said, the 3D viewport. This is where everything happens. This is where we see our objects, where we add things in, where we can set up our layout. Now I'm not going to be covering navigation just yet. I promise I'll get into that in a bit. But for now, I'm just explaining what these different windows are, or these different boxes. Going on to this little box that sits up here, that is our scene outliner. And essentially what we see here is the different items and objects that are in our scene. It really is a great organizational tool, and if you're a beginner, this really makes things easier as well. Getting organized, especially when your projects get a little bit bigger, is one of the most important things you can learn as a beginner. And what you can see here is these collections. Now collections are essentially just these things you can create where you can group different objects in your 3D scene together. You can put them in that group. Look at it almost like layers in Photoshop. I'm not saying they are layers, but you can almost look at it like that in a sense, if that helps you visualize it. You can add in different collections, and you can also name the different object. You can even directly come here and click on these objects instead of actually coming into your scene and left clicking on an object. The outliner is just another way you can visualize what's in your scene and select things. You can even go to the drop down and see more information about certain objects or what relationship they have to different objects. Now don't worry if that doesn't make any sense to you. You don't need to know that right now. If it doesn't make sense, I will explain it later on in the tutorial if it's relevant to what we're doing. But that is our scene outliner essentially. And now we have that out of the way, we can come down here to our properties. Now this is where different things that you do in Blender, you can see their properties. For example, let me just click on an object. Say for example, you just left click on the cube to select it. Then you can go over here to all of the different properties. So if you click on this little tab, which is the materials property, the properties of the material that this thing has are here. So we can change values, we can change different sets of information that relate to the materials on this cube. Now we have, for example, over here one called the object properties. So over here, we can see the different transforms for these objects. Now, transforms essentially, I'll get into that in a little bit, but it is the things that we can use to move an object in 3D space. So we have an X, Y, and a Z coordinate. So you can see, for example, here in the scene, we have the green line here, which is our Y coordinate, and the X is our X coordinate. So pretty simple. So essentially here you can see all of these are set to 0. And that's why our cube is in the middle of our world. If we move any one of these on a certain axis, you can see that the cube here is moving. Doesn't matter if you don't fully get it. I'll definitely get into that more later. But that's what properties are. Different things relating to the objects in our scene. We can come over here and see their properties. Now, sometimes some of these properties are not relating to an object in our scene. For example, if we click over here, we can see the world properties. And the world properties has to do with the environment, which you can't really see now because we're not rendering. So these 3 windows here are just the 3 main windows you need to know for now. Another thing I'll quickly mention is obviously just this little thing down here called the timeline. That's just when you're doing animating, and it's just like a timeline on a lot of different softwares, even 2D softwares. It's where you can come and scroll through on different frames and go to different time intervals within your 3D scene, and then you can change things, and this is where you would be doing your animation and stuff like that. So not to worry about that right now because that's not what we're doing, but you get the general idea here. So just these 3 main ones, keep them in your mind. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about navigation. It's actually pretty simple, but before we can even get into that, we have to talk about the number pad on the keyboard. So if you have ever seen a keyboard, you know that it has a little number pad down here. Now, some computers or more like laptops don't have this number pad. And if that's the case, there's something you can do about that where you can make these numbers up here emulate a number pad. So let's just quickly go over into Edit. Once we have Blender open, Preferences, and then you're going to go over here to the input, go up to keyboard and make sure emulate number pad is enabled if you don't have a number pad. So for me, I have a number pad, so I'm not going to have that enabled. Then I'm going to close that, and now you should be able to use your number pad as well. So while we're on the subject of number pad, you could actually go over here to View, go to Viewport, and then go to, for example, the front view, or go over here and go to the right view. But it's just good to use the number pad. So if you use 1 on your number pad, you can go into the front orthographic view. You can see over here it says front orthographic. If you press 3 on your number pad, you can go into the right orthographic view. You see it says right over here. 7 goes to the top. And if you want to, for example, go to the bottom, you can just hold in Control or Command 7 and then go to the bottom. So it just does the opposite of. So for example, it's the same with 1. If you press 1 on your number pad, it goes to the front view. What if you want to look from the back? So to make it the opposite of, you just hold in Control and then press 1, and now you're at the back view. So very, very easy. You can note that down, write it down. It's super simple. So just experiment with the numbers on your numpad, and that'll take you into different views. Primarily, you're going to be working in 1 or the front orthographic view, so you'll almost always be using 1 or sometimes even 3 to see the side view. So not really that much you have to learn as far as changing the views. That's about the main thing we have to cover for now. But as far as actually moving around with the mouse, if you hold in the middle mouse button on your mouse and you hold it in and you move the mouse, you can actually rotate around like this. And that's pretty simple. So just middle mouse button holding it in. And if you want it to go side to side like pan, all you have to do is hold in Shift, then the middle mouse button, and hold that in and just move side to side. And then if you want to zoom in and out, you can literally just roll the middle mouse button. There's also the option of holding in Control and then the middle mouse button, holding it in and then moving the mouse. But it really is just simpler and more intuitive just to roll the middle mouse button. So Blender's navigations are actually really easy. So just a quick recap, middle mouse button by itself, you can rotate. Shift, middle mouse button, you can move side to side, and then just rolling the middle mouse button, you can zoom in and out. Extremely simple. There's a lot more you could probably say, but those are some of the fundamental things as far as navigation goes. And this isn't really navigation, but what if you actually want to move an object? Well, all you have to do is left click on an object, and you can just come over here to these things here. They're called the tool panels, but you have this one here called the move. You can click on it, and then you can just click on any one of these handles here. So the red one is the X-axis, the green here is the Y, and the blue is the Z. If you press N on your keyboard, you can go over here to the control panel, go to item, and you can actually see here, these are our transforms. So the Z here, for example, is the blue. So you can actually come here to the Z under the location and move it that way or this way. It's just really the same thing, just a different way of doing it. And if you just press G, G is the shortcut key for moving things. So just pressing G, you can actually move things. And also you can go G and then press Z to restrict it to the Z axis, X to the X, or Y to the Y. So all the same thing, just a different way of doing it. If you don't really understand what I just did, don't worry. We'll be recapping it as we get into the modeling tutorial. So it's just something you need to be aware of. And then you have this one here called rotate and scale, and it's the exact same thing. Obviously with rotation, you still have these axes here, but now instead of moving, you're just rotating. So you can left click on one, or maybe left click on this red one, so you can rotate around the X, and the exact same thing. Over here in the properties, you can just come to the rotation and do the same thing manually here on these different vectors. And scale, I mean, need I explain the exact same principle? This time you're just dealing with scale. And you can also just click here on the tool. And by the way, the shortcuts here are S for scale and also R for rotate. So very, very easy navigation and also moving an object around. So I think we really have covered enough now just to get you to understand the basics. We'll now jump into the tutorial, and if there's anything you haven't understood, we'll just cover it slowly. I'll go over it again if need be, but you should be able to get it now that you're up to speed on Blender. So before we get into Blender and we do a little bit of modeling, you're probably going to need a model sheet, and that's just something to give you a little bit of reference. So you can actually see here on the screen that's now recording, here is a picture of a screenshot that I actually took of a model that I've already modeled to practice. So what you can do is you can just use the print screen key on your keyboard, or just use the snip tool that comes with Windows. Just about every operating system has some sort of built-in tool to allow you to do screenshots or snips. So just go ahead, and you can also crop it if you want, just so you have the picture. And once you have that, you know, you should just have, like in this case, I just named mine girl, and here it is somewhere on my computer. What you're going to do is you're going to open up Blender. So in this case, I am using Blender 3.2. So I'm using Blender 3.2, and it's now opened up. Now the thing that's going to be different here for me, I'm just going to enable something that's an add-on. You don't have to do this. That just enables you guys to see over here the keys that I'm pressing. So that just should help you out a little bit. But you can see here we have the default scene, as we've already kind of covered in the previous part. But what you can do is you can press 1 on your front orthographic to go into your front orthographic view, so the number pad 1. You can also just go to view, viewport, and then go to front. And what you're going to do is you're going to get that image that you should have taken a screenshot of. So in this case, I have it somewhere on my computer. So I just named it girl, and you're just going to click on it and just drag it into the front orthographic view. Make sure not to drag it onto the cube, but just drag it somewhere here in the empty space. And you're going to see it adds it in. So now you can make it full screen again, and you have this image here in your front orthographic view. Now you can press G while you have it active, and if you're not sure if you have it active, what you can do, come up here to your scene collection. You can see the different objects, and by default it's going to be named empty over here. See that object called empty? So if it's not active, just click on it, and you should be able to go G and move it, and you could just move it over here, and then when you have it roughly in place, just left click. And what you can also do is while you have it active, you can go over here to your properties panel that we talked about earlier, and you can go over here to object data properties down here on this little image, and you can come to this option here called opacity and just click on it, and then just click here and drag that down a little bit so it's almost see-through like that. Okay, so just a little bit is fine. And what you can now do is you can just hold your middle mouse button in and just move to the side like that. You can see here it's now in the 3D space. But what you can do is you can go G, Y, and move it back in your scene. So G and then Y to restrict it to the Y axis, just so it's not intersecting with the object we're going to be modeling. And if you go into your front orthographic view again by pressing 1 on your number pad, you can see here that we want this the front pose to be in the middle. So in this case, if it's not quite in the middle, all you can do is go G and then X to move it along the X, and just make sure it's as in the middle as it can possibly be here. And also over here, in fact, let's just quickly go and enable up here this thing called X-ray. And now we can see through. We still have this empty active. We can now make sure we have the feet sitting on the ground. So you can see this red line here. That kind of represents where the ground is. So we're gonna go G, Z, and just move it down until that feet there are sitting right kind of on that red line. So now we have this front pose right in the middle there, and we can use that as a reference. And how do we get the side? So the side is simple. All we have to do now is go Shift D with this active. So Shift D, just right click to let go, and then type in RZ90 and hit enter. So RZ90, And if you press N to open up your properties panel and you go to item, you should be able to see here that on the Z, it's rotated 90. So if it's not, just type in 90. Now press free on your number pad to go into the right orthographic view. You can see up here, right orthographic view. And now you can go G, Y and move it on the Y till the side image is lined up here and kind of in the middle of where this cube is over here. You can also look at this blue line here as a reference. That's just the Z coordinate that you see in the right orthographic view. And make sure that she is roughly in the middle here. So G, Y to move it, and make sure you restrict it to the Y when you do, because we don't want to be moving it down or up now, because those feet, as you can see here, are still on that floor there, which is really good. So also with this one now on the side, we want to go G, X and just move it over to the side like this. So when we go into our right orthographic view and we model with this cube here, that image is not intersecting with the mesh here. So now we have our front reference. And if we go into our right orthographic view by hitting free on the number pad, we have our side reference. Now, before we lose anything, let's save this. So we're going to go File, Save As. I'm going to choose my desktop and I'm just going to call it Girl, Low Poly. And I'm going to go Save As. And now it's saved. So when it comes to actually modeling something, we can use something called primitive objects. So you can see here, for example, we have one already in Blender called the default cube. So if you left click on it, you can see it becomes active. Also up here in the scene collection, you can see the cube. And you could make this into any shape once you start editing it. And it's just so you understand. I'm going to quickly delete this. You don't have to follow along, but just so you understand. So for example, you didn't have an object. What you can do is you can go Shift A. Shift A brings up this add menu and you can just go to the meshes. Now the meshes are the actual things, the topology that we'll model in 3D. And you have a whole bunch of objects here. Now all of these are just a bunch of points or vertices that make up an object in 3D space. So here is a cube. The one we already had, here's a circle, here's a UV sphere. So if I add in a UV sphere, you can see same thing, but just it's shaped like a UV sphere. So I'm just gonna go ahead, add back in a cube. And the reason it is actually in the center of the world here when it's added in is because of this little thing here called the 3D cursor. Now over here, you can see above the move tool, there's a 3D cursor. If you click on that, you can click anywhere and it moves that 3D cursor. That 3D cursor is where things get placed by default in your scene. It's also a point you can use to rotate around as a transform. Won't get into that at the moment. But if I now went Shift A after moving that cursor, and I added in maybe a sphere, it adds it in there. So it's important if that thing isn't in the center. First of all, just click back on the move tool if you've done that. If there's ever a situation where you need to get your cursor back to the center, you can go Shift S and you can see cursor to world origin as an option here. You can actually set the cursor to all sorts of places, but to have it in the center of the world, go to world origin. It's important that you understand that as a beginner kind of concept. Also, when an object is added in, all objects in Blender have what you call an origin point. So you can see this little orange yellow dot in the middle. If you come over here to this overlays and you go to the drop down, origins may not be ticked. So if it isn't, just make sure to click on it so you can see that origin point. And that is actually the point where things rotate around. So if you go R, where it rotates around it. If you go S, it scales from that point, and G, all of those transforms look at that origin point. So in 3D, I've already shown you guys previously how you can scale, move things around, rotate things. But how do you actually edit a piece of geometry? To do that, you can come up here, and this is the object mode. And for now, don't worry about all of these options. Just focus on the edit mode. If you go into edit mode with an object selected, you're going to now actually see, instead of seeing not only the whole object, but you actually now see the vertices that make up these objects. In this case, you can see you can actually left click on an individual point. And just like you can move things in the object mode, you can also go G and R. At the moment, you can't really notice rotation. You'd have to select more than 2 to see that. But exact same thing. And this is how you can actually edit the shapes. You can see the origin point is still there in the middle, but if I were to actually just left click and drag to select all of this and then go G to move it off, if I now go back into object mode, you can see the origin point is still there where it is. So if I now go R to rotate, it's not going to look at the object, but actually the origin point. So it's important that you guys understand what the origin point is and how that all works. You could almost look in object mode, an object in object mode as being just a collection of verts that are connected to this group and the vertex is the center of it. So just look at it almost like a collection of points in 3D space. So now that you understand that, let's actually model here. So currently we have the X-ray toggled on. You can also toggle it off so you can see through. Completely up to you, but for now I'm going to press 1 to go into the front orthographic view. We have our image set up and we have our cube, which we're going to be using. And let's go G and then Z to restrict it to the Z. And let's just move it roughly to where the body is here. In fact, I'm going to turn the X-ray on for now so I can see. And let's go S and let's scale this down to about here. So it's almost the width of the body like that. And as long as your cube is just roughly in the middle, it can be down a little bit or up, doesn't really matter. But what you're going to do is you're going to press Tab to go into edit mode, or you can just come up here and go into edit mode that way. And inside of edit mode, you're going to left click and just drag over these top vertices to have them selected like that. And then you're going to go S, X, and scale them on the X axis. You can even see up here, that red is the X. And you can actually see the numbers written here on the different colors, or the letters on the different colors. And then you're going to left click and drag and select the bottom ones, and you can go S, X, and scale them along the X. So now from the front it looks okay, but if we press 3 on the number pad, we can see on the right orthographic view that it's not quite matching up. So we can select these at the top by left clicking and dragging, and we can go S, Y, and flatten it on the Y. You can also just left click and drag and just select just the front ones or the back ones and go G and just move them like that. So we're currently in the right orthographic. And these ones here, they're more or less in the right place, but you can also move them if you wanted to. So now that we have that roughly in place, what we can do now is we can extrude this bottom face. So one way to do that is just left click and drag to select all of the bottom verts. But I'll quickly mention you also have these options up here for different selections. You can also click on the face mode, and now instead of selecting verts, you can select a face, which is a collection of verts and edges. So now you can just left click on that face. And then you can go back into your right orthographic view by hitting 3, and you can go E. So E is the shortcut to extrude, and that'll extrude a face. You can also come here and click on the extrude button here and it'll bring up some options, but it's easier just to use the shortcut. So I've extruded it down and then just left clicked. And then I'm going to just go R, and I'm going to slightly rotate that face, and I'm going to go G, and I'm just going to move it back. So one thing you'll notice is we're still using a lot of the same G, S, and R to scale, rotate, and move things, which is really cool. So now let's go to our front view by getting 1 on a number pad. And you can see here, it's kind of right at the bottom, but over here now it is lacking the right dimension. So what we can do to add in an edge is we can just come over here, hovering over an edge, and you can go Control R or Command R if you're using a Mac, and you're going to see this yellow line appear. Once you see the yellow line, you can just left click twice and it'll add it in. Then go back into your front orthographic view by hitting 1 on the number pad, S, X with that edge selected, and you can scale it out like that. Now let's just say you accidentally unselected that edge. How do you select it? By left clicking and dragging? No, not necessarily, because now that it's an edge select, you might select more edges than you wanted to. In some cases that would happen. So what you may want to do is you can actually, when there's a loop like this, you can go Shift Alt and then just left click on an edge and it'll select the whole loop. You can also just hold in Shift, and while you're holding in Shift and you're moving around, you can select multiple faces. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you guys struggle with that. That's how you select edges. So now we have that in there. If we now go to our right orthographic view by hitting 3, we can see it's not quite right. So let's go to our vertex select, left click and drag to select these verts, and let's just move them by pressing G. And you can see what we're doing here. All right, it's not hard at all. We're just creating the rough shape from the front and the side. And yes, it is boxy, but what we can do now is we can progressively add more topology. So let's come here to the middle, Control R, just like we did hovering over one of these edges, you should see the yellow line appear, and then left click twice. And now what we've done, we've cut it in half here. We have an edge. It's perfectly symmetrical, but we can cheat a little bit. We can actually mirror, so we only work on one side. So let's now left click and drag and just select these verts over here. And let's press X and then go to delete. And what are we working with? Vertices. So let's click delete vertices. And now we only have half an object. We can now go to the properties panel here, and let's go to our modifiers. Modifiers are just these cool things we can add to an object. I won't go into too much details, but let's just go to the add modifier and let's just go and give this one under the generator, and that's a mirror. And all it's simply doing here is mirroring this object. So now we can't actually come here and select anything on this side, but if we select something on this side and we press G to move it or rotate it, you can see it updates on this side. But one of the issues is if we start moving things around, it pulls apart. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here, we're going to click on this thing called clipping. And now if you move it, it all sticks together, which is really cool and it's going to help you a lot. Now going back into the front orthographic by pressing 1 on the number pad, you can actually see that little origin point that I talked about earlier is in the middle. And that's actually what our mirror modifier is looking at as a reference point. So now that we have that mirrored, what we can do is we can press 7 on our number pad to go to the top orthographic view. And this is looking boxy. So let's go Control R. And with Control R, we're going to see the yellow line appear over here. Let's double click by left clicking. And now what we can do is from the top, we can left click and drag and select the front verts over here in the corner, and we can go G and move them in a little bit, and then left click. And let's left click and drag over here, selecting these verts, and then let's go G and let's move them in like that. Now we simply rounded that out. So this is already starting to look a lot better, and we've just used some very simple modeling techniques. Let's also just select this vertex down here by left clicking on it, and let's just go X and delete that vertex. So we now have this open like so. And let's just also select this one at the top here. Let's go X and delete that vertex as well. Okay, so 1 to go back into the front orthographic view. And let's continue extruding this topology up and making the rest of the body. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we have our vertex select option enabled. We're still in edit mode. We're going to left click and drag in our front orthographic view. And we're going to select these verts over here. So once they are selected in your front orthographic view, remember 1 to go into front orthographic view, you're going to go E to extrude and then just move it up to about here on the reference, or just under the neck. And then you're going to go R, so R to rotate and rotate it this much, and then left click, and then just G again and just move it till it's lined up to the bottom of this V here, this delta. Then you're going to press 3 to go into your right orthographic view. And then you're going to go S, Y, and flatten it on the Y, like that. Okay, back into the front orthographic view. Let's go E to extrude and extrude it up like so. And leave it at about here. Let's go into our right orthographic view. And we're going to go S, Y, and scale it on the Y about that much. And then we're going to go Control R or Command R, hovering over one of these edges. You should see the yellow line. And then you're going to just left click once. And then if you move the mouse, you can slide. So you're going to slide it to about here and then left click again, and that should put it in place. And while that is still active, you can go Alt S. And what is different about this, and I won't really get into normals at the moment too much, but you have these things on the faces called normals. They're like these directional points that the face is kind of, like I'll quickly show you because it's kind of hard to explain. I'm just going to enable something. You guys don't have to do this. But it's just so you understand kind of what's going on here. I'll quickly show you. So these things here, right, the normals. Now, if you just press S by itself, it just scales everything as like an average. But if you go Alt S, it looks at these normals and it scales out along the normals. And it does it a little bit in a different way. So going Alt S will scale that out like this, nice and evenly. So I'm just going to turn that off that I turned on because I don't need to have that on right now. But you guys should understand where I'm coming from. So 1 to go back into the front orthographic view. I'm going to come over here, Control R over one of these edges, left click once and then move the mouse to bring it down, and then Alt S and scale it out like that. And then just like that, we have this little thing forming here quite easily. And what we can do as well, just Control R, hovering over this edge here, double click to add in an edge, and over here as well, the back, Control R, and then double click. And now we have a bit more topology. I'm also just going to come in here, Control R, hovering over one of these edges, and just double click once to add in an edge. And that's most of the body done now. So let's just quickly make the leg. So instead of using existing topology in here, what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our object mode up here. And earlier I showed you guys how to add in an object. So we're going to go Shift A. We're going to go to our mesh options. So we're going to add in something called a cylinder. So go ahead and add that in. Now this has got way too much geometry. So let's go over here to this add cylinder option down here. Just left click on it. It'll open it up. And currently this consists of 32 vertices. So let's click on here and type in 5. So now you can see it's a lot less topology. That's more like we want. We're going for the low poly workflow here. And you can also come here to the type and change it from whatever it's at and change it to nothing, so it won't have the caps on here on the end. Okay, so if you quickly go to your X-ray mode and just turn it off up here, you can kind of see it a little bit better. So for now, I'm just turning off the X-ray up here, the toggle. And this is now a new object. So if we selected this, you can see up here, the cylinder is active up here in the scene collection. And we press tab to go into edit mode, or you can also come up here and go into edit mode. You should now see that you can't edit this object over here. You have to actually go back into object mode and then click on this again. But what you can do is you can hold in shift after you've selected one of the objects and then select the second object. Then when both are selected, you can see they're both active. You can press tab or go into edit mode, and now you can work with both of them. And when you go back into object mode, they're still both separate objects. Something interesting about objects that you guys can keep in mind. So we're in object mode again, just select this guy here, and remember that origin point, see that little orange dot? Same thing as the cube, we're gonna go S and just scale the whole thing down in object mode to about this scale. And then left click once you're done, and then go G and move it over here roughly, okay? Then you're going to go and press 3 on your number pad to go to your right orthographic, and you're just going to move it forward a little bit like that, just roughly in place. And now we can tab into edit mode. And while we're in our right orthographic view, let's just turn on our X-ray again up here. And this is left click and drag and just select these bottom verts. And let's just go G, move them down to here, and then go R to rotate them and S to scale a bit. Then we're going to select these ones up here, move them forward, S to scale them a bit, just like that. Okay, now we have the leg starting to form here. And let's just click, drag, and select these bottom verts again. And what we're going to do is we're going to go E to extrude, and then we're going to go S to scale to about this much. And we're going to go G and move all of that forward a bit. And then we're going to go E to extrude, bring it to here. And then we're going to go E to extrude, S to scale, about that much. Okay. Back in your right orthographic view, you can just move this whole thing back by pressing G, S to scale it just a little bit, and then we're going to go E to extrude and extrude it down to here, R to rotate, and then S to scale till it matches up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to press 1 to go into our front orthographic view, and you can see over here, this comes out a little bit too much. So let's just select these verts over here, and let's just go G, move them in, left click and drag, select these two, and then G to move them in. Now you can see it's all starting to look pretty good. So how do we mirror this leg onto the other side? So we can do the exact same thing we did up here with the body. So we're going to go over here, and this time we're going to give it a mirror again under the modifiers. Okay, under the modifiers. And we don't have to enable clipping because these two objects are not actually touching like this one is over here. But you can notice there's not anything appearing here on the other side. And why is that? So if we tab back into object mode, what we have to do in this case, because that origin point is not in the middle here, like this one has its origin point in the middle, we have to actually select a mirror object as a reference. So in this case, we're going to click on this little eyedropper, and we're going to click on the body as a reference. And now it'll put it right in the middle, or the point where it's mirroring is going to be right in the middle of that body. So it's almost using the origin point of this one now, which is really good. So now it's nice and mirrored like that. And it's all starting to look really good. So let's just select these legs again, tab into edit mode. Let's just press 3 to go into our right orthographic view. Click and drag, select these bottom verts, and then go E to extrude, bring them down. R to rotate them, to flatten them out a bit. And then this is really simple. Just click and drag and select these verts over here. E to extrude and bring them forward, and then bring these two verts down like that. Click and drag, select these bottom verts, bring them up. Then go into your front orthographic view. And in this case, you may actually just have to come and select just these verts over here, like that. So clicking and dragging over them, go into your front view and then go G and just move them to the side a little bit. And you can do the same thing over here, just to widen that foot. Okay, so that's looking a lot better. And then you can come in here, add in more topology. You can go Control R, and instead of just leaving it one cut, you can just roll the middle mouse button up once. That's going to add in 2 segments, and then click left twice. And then you can come in here, Control R over one of these edges, and you should see a loop appearing. Just double click once, and then go Alt S and scale it out a little bit on the normals, just to round things out. And there we have a simple foot forming. We can refine things a little bit later, but the foot or leg area is now done mostly. And let's just toggle off the X-ray for now, see what things are looking like. And you can see how simple this is. Even if you're a beginner, these are very, very simple techniques, and they're very easy to follow. So the legs or the arms are going to be very similar to the legs. In fact, to save a little bit of time, what you can do is you can actually select the leg here, and in your front orthographic view, you can go Shift D. That's going to make a duplication, and you're going to move this duplication up here, left click, and then you can go R and rotate. Remember, it's rotating around this origin point. That's why we have it at the top. So we're going to go R to rotate and just roughly line it up with the arms. It can be very rough, and if you need to enable the X-ray Make sure to do that. Then you can go G and just move it so this origin point is at the top of the shoulder here. And these things can be roughly lined up. In fact, let's just quickly, while we have that cylinder 001 active, let's just tab into edit mode. Left click and drag and just select all of these bottom parts and then go G and just move it so this middle bit is kind of where this sleeve is over here. And then what you can do is while that's all still active, you can press X and then go delete faces. And now we only have this cylinder here roughly in place. And if you go free on your number pad, you can see it from the side. And in the side here, you can just left click and drag, select only these top verts and go G, just move them back a little bit and then go S to scale. And then click and drag these ones, G, and move them a little bit to the middle and then go S to scale up. And now that we have that roughly in place, go back to our front orthographic view, and we're now going to quickly model our arm as well. So what we're going to do in edit mode with our arm, let's just select these top verts over here. We're still in our X-ray mode. We're just going to select them and we're going to go R to rotate them and G to move them here a little bit. And then we're going to select this bottom vert here. And we're just going to come up to this thing here called our proportional editing. I'm not going to get into these settings too much, but if you select one vertex now down here and you press G to move it, you can see the rest of them kind of drag along. Now if you roll down your middle mouse button or up, you can see you have this influence factor here. And that controls more or less depending on how much you roll it. So this allows you to grab one point and then kind of gradually over a gradient to the area affect the rest of the verts. So I'm going to drag that down like that. And then I'm going to disable it again up here. And then I'm just going to click and drag to select these bottom verts. And then what I'm going to do is going to double tap R, pressing R twice to rotate it. And then just rotating it till it's a little bit more flat. And then I'm going to go G and I'm going to move it here. And then I'm going to go E to extrude to here and then S to scale down. And now let's go to our right orthographic view and make sure everything is looking okay here from the side. At the moment it kind of is, so I'll maybe just move this out a little bit more here, but just more or less trying to line that up to what we see here on the side. Okay, that's looking okay. So let's go back to the front view and just click and drag to select just these verts down here. We're going to go Shift D to duplicate them, right click to let go, and then E to extrude, S to scale. And then G, let's move them down a little bit, and then R to rotate, like that. And then we're going to go E to extrude them here, S to scale, and then E to extrude, S to scale. I'm going to scale them in like that, so S to scale. Now we have that simple little sleeve there. In fact, we can just select any vertex on this part here and go Control L or Command L. It'll then just select anything that is loose and connect it to that vertex. I'm going to go G and just move it up in there a little bit, just so it's nicely embedded, and then select these bottom bits and move them down again. So now if you go to your right view, you should see it more or less that is also lining up. Go back to the front view and let's make a simple hand over here. In fact, let's just tab back out into object mode, okay? And we're gonna go Shift A, and I'm gonna go to my front orthographic view by pressing 1. I'm gonna go Shift A, and I'm going to get a cube. The cube is down here, and I'm going to go G to move the cube over to where the hand is, and then S to scale it down quite a bit. And then I'm going to go into my right orthographic view, make sure it's in the middle of the hand. Okay, that's all good. So going back to the front orthographic view, and we're going to tab into edit mode and then just select all of this and then R to rotate it like so. Then click and drag and just select these verts over here like that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go G, move them to about here, and then S to scale them a little bit, and then E to extrude, and then click about here, and then go G, move them here, R to rotate, and then S to scale a little bit. Now if you go to your right orthographic view by hitting free on the number pad, you're going to see things don't quite line up. So you're going to select these ones over here, you're going to move them back. Select this one over here, move it here, and then select these two. And then bring these ones to the corner of the thumb intersection there, and then move these ones out a bit too. We're then going to come in here, and you can see we have a face here. In fact, let's just add an extra loop. We're going to go Control R or Command R, hovering over this edge, add in an extra loop. Then we're going to go to our face select option here, click on this face, go back to our right orthographic view, and then we're going to go G and move this one out to here, and then R to rotate. And then we're going to go E to extrude that one about this much, and then S to scale. R to rotate, and then G, and we're going to move that one back like that. And now we have a face over here, and that face in our front orthographic view, we're just going to go E to extrude it, and then S to scale it, and then G to move it, and that's going to be a simple thumb. And this hand here is about as simple as you can get. You can come in here, Control R to add in an extra loop, and Control R in here to add an extra loop. Then if you press A to select all of this geometry, you can come to this tool here called the Smooth tool, and then just drag in this little gizmo and it'll smooth it all out like that. and then just go back to the move tool when you're done. So you can see that's looking pretty cool. So let's just tab back out into object mode. We've got a hand, and instead of adding a mirror to that hand, you can just hold in shift while you have that hand selected and select the arm and then go Control J and it'll join that mesh to that arm. So now that's all one object. Let's just quickly disable our X-ray so we can see what it's all looking like. So pretty easy so far, isn't it? And it's looking really cool, very stylized. Let's quickly get into making the head, which is actually pretty simple despite the fact that it looks a little bit complicated. So let's go Shift A, add in a cube. And with this cube, we're going to go G, Z, and move it to the top of the head. And we're going to go S to scale that cube down to about the size of the head. Let's enable our X-ray once again. Go into our right orthographic view by pressing 3 on the number pad. And let's tab into edit mode and go Control R over one of these edges to add in a loop. Double click, and let's just, with that still selected, go G and move it just down a little bit. And let's go to our vertex select option. Select this vertex over here, these two, and then go G and move that forward a bit. And then select these two back ones here, or these 4, I should say. And then go G and move it like that. And then you're going to select these 2 or these 4 verts at the top by clicking and dragging over them. And you're going to move them here. And you're going to go E to extrude them up and then S to scale like that. It's still looking very boxy. So now if we go Control R while hovering over this edge, we can add in a loop, double click. Go to your front view, and what we're going to do is we're going to go Control R hovering over one of these edges. You can see the yellow line, double click. Then select half of the verts over here and press X and delete. You can see that origin point is nice and in the middle there. So just like we did with our body originally, if we now go to our modifiers, we can give it a mirror modifier. Enable clipping so it doesn't pull apart. And now it's mirrored. So what we can do is come in here, Control R to add in another edge here, double click. And let's just select this vertex down here. Let's go to our proportional editing by enabling it. And then we're going to go G. And if you have too little or too much influence, you can roll the middle mouse button while you move to control that. So we're just going to select that vert and move it in. Then select these verts here and then go G and just move them in as well. Then just select these ones, bring them down a little bit. And you can figure this out yourself. It's actually pretty easy. All you're doing now is going to the different views and you can select verts and you can go G and just move them and roll the middle mouse button while you have that proportional editing, just to select things and round them out. It's actually really simple. So I'm going to select this corner one here in the right orthographic view, and then this one. So just rounding things out. And if you're not sure which one you're pressing, just go into the normal view, left click, then press 3 to go back into the right orthographic view and just repeat like that. You can even select everything. Once again, go to that smooth tool and just slightly smooth it out. Then go back to the move tool. So you can see how we're making the head here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here, Control R over this edge to add in another loop, click it in, select these two here and just move them forward to create a bit more dimension to the face. And then Control R over here to add, double click, select these ones at the front and then G and move them in and down. Then select this brow over here and move it forward. And that just creates a bit more of that area where the eyes would kind of sit. It just gives that feel of it. And then we're going to just move some of this topology back a little bit by just selecting it, pressing G to move it, going back to the front, and you can kind of see how this head is coming together. Pretty cool. So let's now tab back out into object mode, and let's just go Shift A, add in a cylinder. Once again, let's just come to the vertices, and let's just make it 5. Then we're going to go G, Z, move it up, S to scale, and there you have a neck. So go into your right orthographic view if you wish. In edit mode, you can just select the different points, rotate them. And this is just like we've done before. At this point, you guys should be able to start getting how this all works. So selecting the verts, scaling them, moving them by pressing G, and just matching it up to that neck. So just a very simple cylinder like that. You can delete these caps on the end by just dragging over them and going X and delete faces. And there we have it. That neck is very, very easy. Let's go back into object mode. Let's unenable the X-ray. We don't need to see it at the moment. And you can see it's actually coming together pretty well. Before we get into the hair, let's just quickly select the body here. Shift A, left click on this edge to loop select it over here. Let's just go E to extrude, S to scale, and then G, just move it in a little bit. You can disable proportional editing at this point. Move it down a bit, and then E, Z, and extrude that down, and then S to scale it, like that. So just bringing that in like that. Okay, so we're pretty much now done with most of this. You can add some ears as well, like I did. A very simple way to do that is to go Shift A, just add in a cube, G to move that cube forward, S to scale that cube. And with this cube here, just get it roughly the size of the ear. Then tab into edit mode. And if you want to enable the X-ray, just do that. So you can select the top face, G to move it, R to rotate. Then select these bottom ones, G to move it down, R to rotate. Then go to your right orthographic view and select the whole thing, and then go S, Y to flatten it, and then R to rotate it just at a bit of an angle. And at this point, you can do something where you go Control R, roll in 2 extra loops, Control R over this edge, roll your middle mouse button up, and then double click. Now you have a little bit more topology, and in your front view, you can kind of pull these points around, selecting them, and just evening things out just a little bit. And then to make that divot there, it's actually really simple. You can go to your face select option, disable the mirror for now, and then holding in Shift, you can just click on all of these front faces like so, while you're holding Shift, and go E to extrude, S to scale, left click, and then E to extrude in, and then S to scale. And then you can just select the whole thing by pressing A. So you select all of the topology, go to your little smooth tool again, and then just drag that little gizmo and smooth it out just slightly. And there you have a very simple ear to which you can also add a mirror modifier. Make sure to click on the little eyedropper and select something like the head for a reference. And there we have it, ears. You can scale them up a little bit, go back into object mode, and with the head here, you can always just go into edit mode again, go to this edge select option and then select an edge, and you can enable proportional editing. And at this point, you can very simply select edges and just adjust accordingly to make that all look a little bit better by bringing it all out. Maybe go to vertex select if it's easier. But at this point, you guys see what we're doing here, just how simple all of this is. So an easier way to make the hair is to kind of use an existing mesh like the head. So let's just select the head, go into edit mode. And one thing that might make things a little bit simpler here is maybe to round the head out just a bit. So I'm going to go into the X-ray again by toggling it, selecting just these here, and then with proportional editing, I'm just going to press G and move them in a bit. And the same here with the squareness of the head, just bringing it in. Optionally, maybe go Control R, add in an extra loop here, Control R hovering over this edge, see the yellow line and double click, A to select everything, and then just with that smooth tool enabled, just drag the little gizmo and smooth it out a little bit. So now we can select the scalp and start turning it into hair. So let's just go to the face select option here. And let's just double tap A to deselect everything in edit mode. And if you now press C on your keyboard, so C, and you roll your middle mouse button up, you're gonna have this selection tool here. So you can make it whatever size you want by rolling the middle mouse button. Then you can left click and hold in the left click and drag, and then select all of these parts like this. Now remember, this head isn't mirrored. Okay, this head is mirrored, so you should still make sure you have the X-ray enabled just so you select all of the faces. You don't want to miss any faces. So I'm gonna just do it again. So any ones like this, just select them roughly, and go Shift D to duplicate, and then right click to let go. Then you can go Alt S and scale it out along the normal. So Alt S, remember I talked earlier about normals and how they're different from just normal scaling. So Alt S instead of just S. And we want to make this its own geometry. It's no longer part of this. And the simple way to do that is just while that's still selected, you can press P and you're gonna get the separate option. You're gonna go separate by selection. Now this is actually a different object. So we need to go back into object mode. And now we got to click on this object and it's its own new object, and we can tab into edit mode, and now we only have this. So I'm going to just disable the X-ray for now. I'm going to go into my right orthographic view, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Alt S even more with all of that selected. Go something like this. I'm going to enable the proportional editing. I'm going to go to the vertex select option, and then I'm just going to drag and select these verts here. I'm going to go G and move them up to follow the reference. So you can see what I'm doing here, bringing this fringe forward. Same with these ones here, very simple. And then I'm gonna select these ones here. I'm gonna go G and just bring them down and bring these forward. So pretty simple stuff. Then go into the front orthographic view and then select these ones here and then go G and then just move them out a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just more or less. And then what we need to do is enable the X-ray again so we can see through. Let's just select this bottom vertex here, just this one by itself. and then go G, Z. We still have proportional editing, and you should just roll it just slightly and bring it up like that. And then select this one down here and then G and just move it down slightly. So now if we unable the X-ray, you can see here, that's what we have. It's kind of cute looking fringe. We're now gonna just take this, just kind of roll it in like that towards there. And while you have it selected, hold in Shift and then click on this vertex. And then in this vertex, you have 3 of them selected like a triangle. And then if you press F, it'll add in a face between all of those like that. And then you're gonna select this vertex down here and we're gonna go G and just move it up here. Yours doesn't have to look exactly like that, but just something along those lines should be fine. And then what you can do, click and drag and select these bottom vertices over here and go X and delete vertices. And now what we can do is we're going to go to our modifiers. We're going to give this something called a solidify. And now if you come to the solidify and you drag this value, you can see we're adding a bit of thickness to that. Now you can't actually edit that thickness. It's not actually geometry you can grab, but you can still see the thickness even if you edit the geometry here in edit mode, which is really cool. So it's a modifier. It's modifying the mesh in real time while you're working with it. So now let's go to our right orthographic view. Let's enable X-ray again. Let's just click and drag and select these bottom verts over here. And let's just go G and move them down a bit and rotate them. And I'm going to disable proportional editing for now. Then I'm going to go E and I'm going to extrude them down a bit. Then I'm going to select this vertex here, G to move it in a bit, and this one here like that. Select all of these again. And I'm just going to continue. E to extrude, S to scale, E to extrude, S to scale. Then I'm going to go into my back orthographic view, and instead of pressing 1 on the number pad, you can hold in Control or Command and then press 1. And now you're seeing the back. Let's just try and model it from the back here. I'm just going to grab that vertex and I'm just moving these out just to round them out a little bit, moving this one in. You don't have to do it this precise, but you get the idea here. All we're trying to do is just even out the verts here at the back. So we kind of have the hair just coming down like that. Something very simple, but it works. And then if you wanted to, it's optional, you can add these little bits at the side. A very simple way to do that is to go to your edge select option up here in edit mode. Select any edge up here. Go to your right orthographic view, Shift D to duplicate it, enable the X-ray, and then G, move it somewhere above where that hair should start, and then E to extrude, S to scale, rotate, E to extrude, S to scale, and then R to rotate, and then E to extrude down, and then S to scale. Go to your front view, and now you can select these edges like that, and you can move them in a little bit and edit them to make them look nicer from the front as well. And it still has that modifier on it. Now you can notice that this one here, if I go to face select and I select this face, the solidify modifier here is making the effect come in. But this one here, if I select the face, the effect is happening towards the outside, and that's got to do with the normals. So what we may have to do in this case is correct the normals. I'm not going to get into why that happens. It's a bit tricky to explain for beginners. So just for now, all you have to do is press A to select everything, Alt N, and then go recalculate outside or inside, depending on what the situation is. So I'm going to go for outside. And now all of these should be the same. So I'm just going to select a face here, go Control L to select the whole thing, and then G and just move it out a bit. And you guys can adjust this however you want. You don't have to do it exactly like me. I'm completely up to you how you want to do that. And once you're happy with that, you can also just select any vertex or face, Control L, select the whole thing, and then go Shift D in the right orthographic view, move it back, and then slightly edit the second piece. And there you have these little hair droopy things coming off the side. And you know, very, very simple. So based on what I've just shown you guys, you can make this however you want. Now that you know the basic techniques, but it's very boxy, very stylized, very low poly, but that's a nice look. And that's actually what we're deliberately going for here. So there we have it. The character is pretty much done. Add a nose if you want. But what we're going to do next is we're going to add some nice colors or materials, what we call shaders. And then we'll add some nice lights, and I'll show you how you can render this out as a nice looking result. And then we're pretty much done. Okay, so whenever we want to work with things, remember our properties panel over here. So remember we have this one here called the materials property. I think I briefly mentioned this in the very beginning, but over here, if you click on it, it says material properties. Here is we can actually add materials and change their properties. So how do you add a material? It's actually very simple. Let's just say you want to add a material to a certain object. You just simply left click on it in object mode. So let's start with the body, right? And then you go over here and you're going to see this button called New. Now there's a little drop down here. That's where pre-existing materials are, materials you already have. Let's just go New. And now it's created a material, it's given it a default name. So you can actually double click here or just click on it, the name, and call it something. So I'm going to call it yellow because I want to be a yellow color. And then over here, you're going to see something called a preview. This is where you can actually see a preview of your material. And under here is something you see the surface. This is where you change a whole bunch of settings. Now, I'm not actually going to get into all of these settings here because that's a lot more in depth. And this is something you'll learn as you grow as an artist. But for now, we're just going to look at nothing more than the color, literally just the color. At the moment, the color is white. So we want yellow. So we click on this and we go and click on yellow or wherever we want. Not only can you change saturations here and colors, but you can also come to the value slider and change the values. So pretty simple. Not much more to say than that. And now you have that material. Now, obviously you're not seeing it because you have to actually render. So rendering is when we press Z on a keyboard and we can click on this option called rendered. And now we're no longer seeing just the shading, viewport shading, but we're seeing the actual material. Now, another thing to think about is when you go up to your properties, go up here to this little camera, that's your render properties. Currently, there's an engine, a render engine being used called Eevee, right? It's more like a real-time rendering engine, and we're gonna change it to something called Cycles. Now, I'm not gonna really get into the details here. Cycles does a lot more like bounce sliding, ray tracing, a lot more advanced things. But if you have a GPU under the device, you can enable it. If you don't, just leave it at CPU. It's not a big deal. This isn't really a render processor intensive render anyway. It's very low poly, so it probably doesn't matter. So I'm changing mine to GPU. We'll add lights in a bit, but for now, I'm just going to go into the material preview, which is kind of like a mix between just the standard viewport solid shading and the render. So you can see here we have the color. So what we're going to do now is go back to our materials properties. We have that shirt still selected, or the body. And remember we added that yellow material. What if we want to add more? So let's just tab into edit mode. And let's just say, for example, let's just go Control R, add in a loop here, double click, double G to slide, and then Alt S to scale out along the normals. Maybe move it up a bit. Let's just say we want to add a little border here. So what we can do, go to your face select and then going Shift Alt. With face select enabled, you can just Shift Alt, click on this edge over here and it'll loop select these faces here. And now what you can do is come here under your materials property, click on a plus again. And now you have a new thing here. You can go new and let's just call it red, for example. And now we can go assign while those faces are selected and has that material. Now we called it red, but we still have to come to the surface here. And just like we did with the yellow, come to the base color and give it a color. I'm going to go with an orangey kind of red. So I'm going to quickly tab back out into object mode. And now I'm going to select the shirt. And instead of this time still on the materials tab, instead of coming and creating a new material, let's just go to this drop down and get the existing yellow. And then what we can do as well is tab into edit mode and then click on the plus here. And we can create a new one. And once again, we can just go down and select a pre-existing color. So I'm going to go with the red. And this time, if I want it to be assigned to something, I have to actually select it. So I'm going to click on a face here on the sleeve. I'm going to go Control L to select the whole thing and then click on the red and then assign. How simple is that? Now let's create a new thing, which is going to be the skin. So let's just left click on the hand or on any face on the hand, go Control L to select the whole thing. Then let's click plus over here. And this time we're going to create a new material. Let's just call it skin. And now we can go to the surface and let's just give it something like a brownish blush. I'm going to kind of go for almost like a brown olive kind of color. And then I'm going to go assign. You can make your skin whatever you want. Perfectly fine. So now we have that there. I'm going to tab out and now we can actually select the head and go to the drop down and we already now have that skin. So let's select it. Let's just also select the ear, go to the drop down, give it that same skin, select the neck, go to that drop down, give it the skin, and let's select the hair. Now the hair we haven't created a material for, so let's click on the hair, create a new material and call it hair. And let's just come to the base color. I'm going to go with a brownish kind of red like that. And there I have it. And that's now the hair. So let's go to the legs. Let's click on the legs. Let's go new. I'm going to call this blue. And I'm going to make it kind of like a robin's egg kind of blue, like jean almost. Then I'm going to click on the plus again, go new. And I'm going to call this one darker blue. And if I want to assign it to any specific part, we have to go into edit mode. In this case, I'm going to make sure face select is enabled. I'm going to go Shift Alt. Click on this edge over here to loop select these faces. Control plus or Command plus to grow the selection just once. So we have this part here selected. I'm going to click on the dark blue and go assign. And then under the base color, let's make it something that fits the description like that. And the exact same thing for the rest. In fact, I'm going to turn on my X-ray here. And I'm just going to click and drag and just select these bottom faces. They're all selected. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come here plus, I'm going to go assign, I'm going to click new, and I'm going to make this like a leathery kind of brown color, bring that value down, and there you have it. Pretty cool. And you can even click on here and name it something. I'm going to call it leather. And there we have it. How simple is that? I'm going to go back into object mode. And now we've added all of these materials, as you can see. Once again, if you want to see this, you actually have to press Z and go into material preview like I said. So there you have it. So press Z and go into either rendered or material preview. So now all we have to do is just render this out. We've already gone to our render engine and given it the cycles engine, but we do need to add some lights. So let's go Shift A. And we've been adding meshes before, but let's go down to our lights. Add in this thing called an area light. And we're going to go G, Z, and move it, just like we've moved anything else. I'm going to move it up to here. So we've moved it up on the Z axis. And then we're going to go R, and we're going to rotate it like this. And then G to move it. Now you can pick whatever lighting direction you want. Once you have a position where you want your light to come from, go over to your properties and you're going to see this little light bulb, and that's your light settings. And why is this our properties? Like I've mentioned before, because we edit our properties here. So you can go to the power, and just as you might assume, that's got to do with the strength. So the more you put this level up here, the watts, the more power you're going to get. Pretty common sense. And then also the size, that's going to make it a bit of a softer light. The smaller you have that, the point of the light, just like you do in real life, you're going to have a sharper light, and the more broader the light is and closer to the subject here, it's going to be a bit more scattered. So I like to increase the size a little bit bigger than the default, something like that. And if we now go Z and we go rendered, we can see we have this light. So it's up to you how much you want to tweak the power amount here for your light. You can drag it up as much as you want. You can even change the color of your light to give it some mood. Very simple stuff, but once you're happy with it, you can also go Shift D with that light selected to duplicate it like anything else, and then rotate it. And you can duplicate and make as many of these lights as you want. So I'm happy with that. I'm gonna go Shift A. I'm gonna add in one more object, and that's just a plane on the floor here. I'm gonna go S to scale that plane up like that, and then tab into edit mode. And I'm just gonna go into my solid work express, so Z, and then go solid. And you can go to your edge select this back edge, and then go E, Z, and extrude it up on a Z like that. Select this edge here, and then you can go Control B, and Control B allows you to make a bevel on an edge. You can move it as big as you want by moving your mouse, and then roll your middle mouse button to add in more segments, and then just double click and it's added in. Now you can go back into object mode, and you have this nice fancy backdrop, and you can see here in our scene is a camera, so you can literally click on that camera, and with a camera active you can press 0 on your number pad and it goes into camera view. And then with that camera selected, you can double tap R, and as you move your mouse you can actually rotate the camera. If you press R by itself, you can rotate just like this, and then you can press G, and G allows you to move it. So you just press G and move the camera to where you want it. And then you can, just like anything else, you can come to your move tool and you can just move these little sliders, or you can just press G like we've been doing. So G and then Y to move along the Y, or Z, whatever you want. And if you want to go change the dimensions, just go to your output here and you can change your resolution. So these are the pixels, so 1020 by 1080 by 1920 here. I'm just going to drag this value here down a bit just to make it a bit of a different ratio, just like that. And then I'm going to just move my camera in a little bit, something like that. You can also come here to your camera settings. I'm not going to get into all the advanced things here. There's a lot that can be said, but just as a beginner here, let's just go to the focal length and change that. So those of you who are familiar with photography, a lot of this would make more sense to you. But once again, it's not what we're focusing on here, as this is more just about a very beginner's tutorial for the modeling and things like that. So here we have our camera setup, we have our scene, we're pretty much done. So let's just select these two reference images. I'm holding in Shift, and remember these collections I told you about? If we now go M and we go new collection, after we selected those two reference images, we can go ref, type whatever you want in here, and then go OK. And under your collections here now, if you just drop down this main collection, you can now see a collection called ref. And now two references in there, we can just untick it and they're out of the way. So they're not deleted, but they're just out of the way. So if we want to ever bring them back, we can, but that just organizes our scene a little bit. And there you have it. We now have this. If we press Z and we go rendered, we have our subject in the view here of the camera. And another cool thing you can do in camera view is you can go Control B and then click and drag over the camera with Control B, and it's just going to limit that render to the camera, and that's going to free up a little bit of your processing as well. So there we have it, a fantastic looking low poly model that you guys can be proud of. I hope you've enjoyed this. What you can do now is press Z, go back into solid mode, and all you have to do is go to render image, and it's going to render this image for you. And in fact, I'll quickly just press escape to cancel this because I forgot to mention. Under your render settings, just click on that and go down to the render and take the sample amount down to something like 80. Because if you have it at 4,000, whatever, it's going to take forever to render. So the more samples, the higher the quality is. But if you have this little thing, the denoiser enabled, Blender's algorithm does a pretty good job at getting the noise out after you've rendered. So just make sure you do that and then go render image, and we'll see what that looks like. So you can see here, this little sample count. It's 48 samples out of 80. Okay, it's just finished. It's added the denoising, and there it is. Now what you can do is you can go to image, save as, and then save it wherever you want on your computer. And that's it. That's how simple this is. I hope you guys have learned something here. I know I didn't go into detail on everything like I said in the beginning, but this is just absolutely to whet your appetite and get you started as a beginner. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I will be putting this blend file on my Patreon, and I'll probably do some more videos following up on this one. We're going to do a little bit of rigging, animation, so you guys can learn more about this. And definitely leave your comments below, and I hope you guys have a good time.